All right, so let's proceed then. So as I said, this session is about EXIN Agile Scrum Master, and we are going to give you a quick introduction to what this program is all about, what is the curriculum for the program, as well as what the exam for EXIN ASM looks like. Very briefly, we are going to talk about what is Agile and what is Scrum. And then we are going to run a short simulation of a daily stand-up meeting. So just to give you a flavor of how the platform works, as well as how to conduct a daily stand-up meeting. Okay, so let's talk about EXIN ASM. So EXIN is a world leader in different kind of training programs and certifications related to the information and communication technology, the ICT industry, if you like. The target audience for this new program they have is all professionals who are looking to gain knowledge in the field of IT and project management. Okay, so that's what the EXIN ASM really talks about. There is no specific the Agile Scrum Master program from EXIN, although there is a mandatory training module that you have to go through. And of course, Simplilearn training will help you fulfill that requirement if you intend to appear for the certification. Remember that EXIN ASM is not what I would say a beginner certification. A certain amount of familiarity with Scrum and Agile is assumed, although it is not mandatory that you should have gone through the EXIN Agile Scrum Foundation. So EXIN also has a foundation training. If you are a beginner in Agile and Scrum, then it is recommended that you first do the EXIN Agile Scrum Foundation, because ASM is not a beginner certification. Okay, so this particular program is basically meant for covering the curriculum required for EXIN Agile Scrum Master program, and there are 7 lessons that we cover as part of this overall program. Okay, so we start off with the Agile way of thinking, which is basically talking about basics of Agile, very quickly the principles and manifesto, and the whole philosophy of Agile around being flexible, iterative development, incremental development, and the philosophy of continuous improvement. EXIN ASM, unlike the Scrum Alliance certifications, requires you to have a basic understanding not just about Scrum, but also about a number of other methodologies for development like waterfall or lean, extreme programming, crystal, DSDM Atom, and so on and so forth. So we are going to give an overview of all these other methodologies, and then we are going to link the disciplines of DevOps on the one hand and IT service management on the other hand with Agile. DevOps refers to the discipline where you have, for example, configuration management, continuous build and release management systems, continuous integration systems, automated test systems, and basically DevOps is meant to accelerate the transition between development into test environment, and then from test environment into the production environment. Okay. Then we will talk about Scrum events and artifacts, where we will talk about the Scrum life cycle, what are the different Scrum time box, and the sprint. Sprint basically is the iteration that is the basic time box within the Scrum methodology. And then we talk about different events within Scrum, including sprint planning, reviews, and retrospectives, and so on. Then we talk about different roles within the Scrum methodology, which is developer role, product owner role, as well as the Scrum Master role. Okay. And as we go along, we talk about what are the do's and don'ts of being a Scrum Master or a product owner, and so on and so forth. Okay. And then we will talk about Agile estimation, planning, monitoring, and controlling. Okay. So this is where we give a background about stories, epics, what are story cards, How do you go about planning for an overall product roadmap, planning for a release, and planning for a sprint? In the context of planning, we will also talk about estimation. We will talk about two units of estimation, which includes story points and ideal hours. We will then talk about two techniques of estimation, which includes planning poker and affinity estimation. And then we talk about, once you have gone through this planning process, how do you then stay in control of the project, comparing actual versus planned and so on, using techniques such as use of burn down charts, other charts, and so on and so forth. Then we talk about agile and use of agility on complex projects. One of the criticisms that is leveled at agile is that agile works very well for small projects which are having co-located teams, very mature teams, and so on and so forth, but they don't really scale very well if the project is complex. Now that is a bit of an unfair criticism. I have personally used agile in different environments and different projects, and definitely it is possible to work with agile in enterprise scale, highly complex project environments. However, we need to have certain mechanisms in place for coordinating the work potentially of multiple Scrum teams. This is where artifacts like Scrum of Scrums or product coordination teams comes into picture. We talk about what happens when you have a distributed team, how to make agile and the different ceremonies of agile work when you have a distributed team. About a specific agile framework which is called a Scaled Agile Foundation. Now, SAFe, as it is abbreviated, stands for a framework that few of the original thinkers behind the Agile methodology have come up with in order to scale the concept of agility from an individual product to a program to an entire portfolio level. So that's the topic that we introduce in the Agile for Complex Projects. Then we talk about where to apply Agile and where to perhaps not apply Agile or apply Agile with a little bit of caution, because projects must have certain characteristics for agility to be successful. Then we refer to different kinds of tools that are used in Agile methodologies. This includes project management tools, as well as tools that are used for continuous integration, build systems, and so on and so forth. Then finally, we talk about the adoption of Agile, how a team which is currently working on a different methodology transition over to an iterative and incremental paradigm. What kind of organizational changes are required? Of course, the team needs to change the way it works, but the organization as a whole, including things like HR, facilities, and so on, needs to support the team and introduce the culture of agility within the organization. Because the whole philosophy of Agile is revolving around the notion of self-organization and self-organized teams. Now, this doesn't happen out of thin air. It requires time and effort to achieve the notion of self-organization. So we need to have a support system in place before you go to that mode. Okay. The EXIN Agile Scrum Master is a certification that you can gain by fulfilling two requirements. The first requirement we talked about, that you need to have gone through a training program from an accredited training organization. So like Simplilearn is an accredited organization where you can receive the training from an accredited trainer. Okay, and all these trainings require to have case studies. It is mandatory for us as a training provider to provide case studies, right? So the idea behind this certification is that it is not, run-of-the-mill training where you will get a bunch of theory and then you pass an exam and that's it. It requires you to have gone through this training, which in turn requires to have administered certain case studies like release planning case study or an estimation case study and so on. For the examination, EXIN recommends that you have studied at least 120 hours. It could be slightly less or slightly more than that, depending upon how much of an exposure you have to Scrum and Agile methodologies. The exam itself has a duration of 90 minutes, and the exam consists of 40 questions. These are all multiple choice questions. Either 3 or 4 choices are provided, and you have to pick which of those choices is the correct answer. Only one answer is going to be correct at any point in time. If you choose the correct answer, you get 1 point. If you do not, if you leave the question blank or you choose a wrong answer, then you do not get any points for that one. The minimum passing score is 26 points. So you need to get 26 out of 40 correct in the examination in order to pass the test, and then you can claim to be EXIN Agile Scrum Master. Okay, that's certification. There is a free sample test. If you visit this website, you will be able to get more information about the certification, the examination, and so on and so forth. So if you do sign up for Simplilearn's EXIN ASM program, then you will meet the mandatory training requirement. I mean, the entire course, there is a schedule for courses that is announced on the Simplilearn website. This is just a demo session, right? So this demo session doesn't fulfill the requirement. The actual training, which is of duration of 4 sessions of 4 hours each, that will help you satisfy this requirement. So let's move further on. So what is Agile? Remember, this is not an introductory program, so we will not spend a lot of time defining what agility is and the principles of Agile and so on. But the manifesto of Agile, which was signed by 17 thought leaders in the Agile software development industry, is an important facet of introducing the Agile methodologies, because this is the basic philosophy. So the very first module, as defined by the EXIN ASM program or curriculum, is the Agile way of thinking. So you need to understand, when you are using Agile methodologies, what is the way in which you should think, and what are the basic principles that you should use to guide your behavior as you're working on these projects. So you might have, some of you may have seen the Agile Manifesto. It's a document that was signed in February of 2001. And that's when the word Agile came into existence as a result of that. So Agile Manifesto says that we value the items on the left, these items, more than the items on the right, which are these items. So the items that are on your screen on the left in blue font are valued more than the items on the right side, which are in the red font. Now let's elaborate that a little. So for example, we value working software more than comprehensive documentation. Now I put a check mark against working software and a cross mark against comprehensive documentation. That's slightly fallacious, because Agile does not say do not produce documentation. What Agile says is that working software is more important than documentation. All the documentation that you produce, no matter how good it is useless until you have working software. So the idea is focus on the software, not on the documentation. Doesn't mean you don't produce any documentation, but focus more on the software. Sometimes people will challenge that notion and say, oh, but my team is junior, that I have newcomers joining the team all the time, and where will they learn, and so on and so forth. So all these objections are valid. I'm not saying, again, no documentation. But the point is this: the best documentation you can produce for software is the code itself. If the code is well written, if the code is modular, if the code is well commented, then that is the best documentation you can hand over to a developer. If you give him reams and reams of documentation, then the developer will be lost. They won't know where to look for information. But code, every developer can read. It is unambiguous. It executes in exactly the same way every time. So focus on the software, not on the documentation, right? That's the idea. The next assertion is that responding to change is more important than following a plan. Again, it doesn't mean that you don't have to plan. Plan is important. You need to have a plan. But if you get hung up about, oh no, this was my plan and I'm going to do only this and nothing, then that will lead you to lack of collaboration with the customer. Because every single project, every single development activity will go through a process of change. I have been working in the industry for 23 years. I have not worked in a single project where there was no change. Maybe some of you have been lucky, but I'm sure many of you would relate to the fact that change is inevitable. The way you should respond to change is by welcoming them, by addressing the change, by making your methodology flexible that I can absorb change frequently during the life cycle. You don't want to create a bureaucratic change management system where you keep on pushing back on changes even though the customer really wants them, right? So following a plan is important, but if the customer wants a change, see how you can best respond to that. The next assertion is customer collaboration is more important than contract negotiation. Of course, contracts are important. Every single word that is written in the contract must be done. There is no way around it because it's a signed document. It's a legally tenable document. People can take you to court if you don't do what is specified in the contract. However, more valuable than a signed contract is the fact that you are collaborating with the customer, that the customer feels that they are driving the project, that they are in control of the project, that you are responding to their needs, you are delivering what they want, and you are solving their problems. If the customer has that confidence, then you can work out and work through any kind of issues that you encounter through the contract. But if you're not collaborating with the customer, then you will be stuck with the contract and it will not take you much further than that. So the final assertion of the Agile Manifesto is that individuals and interactions are more important than processes and tools. And of course, you need to have a process. Agile itself is a process. Scrum has a bunch of processes that are defined and you need to follow them. But the best process is a team of individuals which is actively interacting with each other, because at the end of the day, development of a product, be it a software product or any other product, is a creative activity. Creativity happens when individuals interact with each other without being hamstrung by a specific rigid process. The process is valuable only if individuals using the process find it valuable and if it fosters interaction between the team members. All right. So this is the Agile Manifesto. Whatever you do in the methodology, you have to make sure that you are in alliance with the Agile Manifesto. So now I'm going to introduce the life cycle of Scrum. Okay. So what is Scrum? Scrum is one of the ways in which you can work in the Agile methodologies. There are many methodologies which can call themselves Agile. If you do extreme programming, you are doing Agile. If you are doing DSDM, you're doing Agile. If you are following Crystal, you are following Agile. So Scrum is one of the instantiations of the Agile methodology. Scrum is by far the most popular of the Agile methodologies too. It is most prevalent among all the other development methodologies today. Start off with what is known as a product backlog. What is the product backlog? It's basically a collection of items of work. You can call it requirements, but it need not always be a requirement for a feature. It may be a bug fix. It may be some activity that you need to perform as a team, let's say a refactoring activity, or even a documentation activity sometimes. Whatever items of work that the team can perform, which will be of value to the customer, is in the product backlog. From the product backlog, you go to the in a given sprint. Let's say my sprint is 2 weeks. In the next 2 weeks, which of these items can I realistically expect to complete? And in that, the team relies on the fact that the backlog is not just a random collection of items, but it is in priority order. I will take the first item and then the second and then the third. And I ask the team, can you do the fourth or can you not? And if they say, yeah, we can do another one and another one and another one, but maybe we will stop at 7. That's all we can do in a 2-week time box. Then the list of those 7 items becomes your sprint backlog. Every day within the sprint, then from the planning process towards the end of the sprint, you basically work on converting the backlog into a working increment of the software. In other words, what you had in the beginning is a requirement which is stated in black and white, and what you should have at the end is a working instantiation of that requirement. It needs to be in the form of working software. So that's the idea behind a sprint or a time box. Now, every day within the sprint, there is a ritual which is called the daily scrum or the daily stand-up. The daily scrum is a mechanism for the team to look at what is going on in the project, how they are working, what they are working on, what are their issues and resolutions to those issues, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's the Scrum life cycle. So next, we are going to go to talk about the daily Scrum, following which we will do a simulation of the daily Scrum and see how it is done. Right? So just to get a little bit of learning of executing at least one of the Scrum ceremonies. When you do the actual course, and we go through all the Scrum ceremonies, but we'll go through the daily stand-up after I give you a quick introduction. Go ahead, Malay, you had something?
Okay, so what I wanted to ask was, how are these sprint dates decided? Who determines and by what metric is it decided that this will be the length of the sprint?
All right, excellent question. Thanks, Malay, for asking. So we talked about Scrum being made up of multiple sprints, each sprint being of 1 to 4 week duration. So Malay's question, if I understand him correctly, and feel free to disagree if I don't, is who determines whether it is 1 week or 2 week or 3 week or 4 weeks? And the answer is the team determines it. How do they determine it? Well, you start off, it can be a wild guess in the beginning. I might say, okay, maybe 2 weeks seems like a reasonable time box. I think we can get something meaningful done in 2 weeks. And it's a short enough duration that I can demonstrate it, I can get feedback, and before I move to the next sprint. So the whole idea behind an iterative process is that you do something, you get feedback, and then based on the feedback, you take the next steps. So if 1 week is too short a duration for you to showcase anything to get feedback, then probably it is too short. If you like 4 weeks, then take 4 weeks, but 4 weeks is pushing it a little bit. Most Scrum teams prefer iterations between 2 to 3 weeks, 2 weeks being by far the most common. If you do a survey of all the thousands of teams that are doing Scrum today, 2 weeks is the most common. But that's not cast in stone. It's up to the team to figure out. But usually no more than 4 weeks, because that is too long a duration to go without feedback. And usually not less than a week, because less than a week is very hard to showcase anything meaningful at the end of the day. All right? All right. So now what we are going to do is I'm going to introduce one of the Scrum rituals, which is called the daily Scrum or the daily stand-up. Now the word Scrum itself comes from the sport of rugby. If any of you have played rugby or watched rugby in action, before the play starts, before the ball is kicked and the people start running with the ball or with behind the ball, the teams basically get together in like a huddle formation, standing in a circle, shoulder to shoulder, muttering something to each other, sometimes yelling something to each other. And that is the scrum. It is called a scrum. So the daily scrum when you talk about the daily stand-up meeting or the daily scrum, that's the picture that you should imagine in your mind. The entire team, it could be a sports team, it could be a team of software developers, really doesn't matter, standing shoulder to shoulder. First of all, standing, so that's why it's called a stand-up meeting. It's not people who sit down and then talk at leisure. It's a standing meeting, shoulder to shoulder, because it's a meeting that is meant more than anything else to foster the team environment, to be a team. It's a meeting, if I were to borrow a definition of, of the people, for the people, by the people, is what a democracy is. The daily scrum is a meeting of the team, by the team, and for the team. Now, what happens in the meeting? First of all, every member of the team is supposed to attend it. Secondly, the meeting happens on every working day. If it's a holiday, it doesn't happen. You don't have to worry that, oh my God, Scrum is going to eat into my weekend time. Working day is time for the daily stand-up. You can pick whatever time of the day you have, which is convenient to everybody. Some of the teams that I know started first thing in the morning. Let's say 9 a.m. is the report to work, and they start this day with the daily stand-up. Other teams prefer like 11 a.m. So people have had a chance to come in, have a bit of a snack, have a bit of a casual chat, finish up something that they started working on yesterday but haven't yet completed. So 11 o'clock is when they prefer. It allows also time for the stragglers who are always late. And there might be some in your team as well. Some other teams which are distributed, they prefer a time which is in the afternoon or the evening so that the remote team members can also attend. So if I have a team in India and the UK, for example, 3 p.m. is maybe a good time because by that time the UK team has come in and the India team is also during the working hours. If you have India and US, becomes a little bit more challenging, but again, you pick whatever time works for you. The meeting is supposed to be 15 minutes or less, no more than 15 minutes, and we only talk about 3 points. Only talk about these 3 points. What did I do yesterday? What will I do today? And what are my blocking issues? All of these has to be in the context of the project. Now, yesterday maybe I played football with my son, or I watched the T20 game between India and Sri Lanka. Very interesting information, but not relevant for the project. So it should not. This is not a forum for that. Yes, you can have banter and jokes, but 15 minutes, the entire team is in attendance. You don't want to waste everybody's time. So focus on only these 3 items and nothing other than these 3 items. Okay, so that's what the meeting is about. So here is what we are going to do now. We are going to simulate a daily stand-up. In other words, I'm going to request each one of you to describe what you did yesterday, what you are going to do today, and what are your blocks. Okay, it need not be related to a specific project. You can say what you did in your day-to-day work, or you can say what you did if you were on a holiday, what you did at home. The idea is to get into the rhythm of quickly giving you an update which is relevant to every one of us. So let's imagine all of us are working on a fictitious project together, and I'm going to describe what I did for the project. Let's say our project is that we are all interested in the EXIN Agile Scrum Master, and eventually we are going to go in for this certification, and therefore we are going to say something that points to that task. So let me go first, and I'm going to go through my updates in this specific sequence. So yesterday I prepared the slide deck for today's presentation. There were a few typos and I had to correct them. I sort of proofread them, and I did a bit of rehearsal. I like to rehearse every slide that I'm going to talk about. Today I am going to be delivering this lecture to this group of people, very interesting group of people who are going to have a demo session. Hopefully some of them will join the training program which is starting on February 27th. There are no blocking issues as of now at this point. The only slight issue that I have is that I'm new to this Citrix platform that is being used. So I'm slightly anxious how that is going to work for me. but hopefully it should not be much of a hindrance. At this moment, I'm not blocked as such. All right, so that was my update. Now I'm going to call out somebody's name in turn, and what I would request you is give an update. Doesn't matter whether it's what exactly it is, as long as it is following this pattern. All right, go ahead, Shashikant. Do you want to provide your update through the chat box or the questions window? All right, so I'm going to start reading Shashikant's update as he's typing. So yesterday, Shashikant went through the Simplilearn portal where he found the Agile Scrum demo schedule. So very quickly, let me summarize this activity. So one of the things is that the daily stand-up meeting is a short meeting. It has to be kept to the point. So we saw, for example, Shashikant's update, very precise, to the point. It is very important for you to go through in exactly this sequence and cover all these items. Sometimes team members hesitate to bring up blocking issues. That is not advisable because a sprint is a very short time window, 2 weeks or less, to develop something, to test it, and bring it to a state where it is near releasable or at least demo worthy is challenging. If you're blocked for whatever reasons, that something's not working on your machine, is a technical issue you're trying to solve, not able to get pointers to it, or you're waiting for somebody else to do their work, or you have a dependency, that issue, even if it is blocking you for half a day or a day, can be critical, make a difference between completion of the work for the sprint or not non-completion of the work. So be proactive in bringing up those issues. Now, when somebody does bring up a blocking issue, what's supposed to happen then? Who's supposed to take action on this? Who is primarily responsible for removing the blocking issues that the team brings up in the stand-up meeting? Is it the team member himself or herself? Is it the project manager, the line manager, the customer? Who's supposed to be solving these blocking issues? Scrum Master is the one who is primarily responsible for removing blocking issues. Now it could be anything, like anybody can bring up any issue that I may be blocked because I'm having a medical issue. I may be blocked because of my daycare is not working and therefore I have to stay at home, can't come into work. Or it could be a technical issue. Now, Scrum Master is not a Superman or a Superwoman that can have answers to all of these questions. Well, what the Scrum Master needs to have is the interest, first of all, the motivation, and the resourcefulness to find out who can solve these issues. So if my issue is a technical issue, Scrum Master will go scouting around the organization. Who can solve my technical issue? They will contact the technical gurus, the architects, and so on, and call them up and say, can you please help my team member? My team member is stuck and this is causing a big issue in our sprint. If you would spare 5 minutes or 10 minutes of your time, I would be very grateful. They will do whatever it takes to get technical assistance. If your issue was a personal issue, then they will talk to you about how we can get around a personal issue. They would ask if they can give me a laptop, I can work from home if I have a daycare issue. They will check if I have internet connection, if they can organize an temporary internet connection for me that I can be productive while working from home. Or if nothing is possible, they will ask the other team members if they can shoulder some of the workload for the time being so that the whole team is not blocked because I am not able to come to work. Right? So the Scrum Master needs to be extremely resourceful, have tremendous amount of soft skills in order to get around the blocking issues. That said, it is not only up to the Scrum Master to solve those issues. Sometimes I may bring up a technical issue. I got this error while I was working on this program. The error code was 1403. I just couldn't understand head or tail of it. I don't understand what is happening. Now somebody else in the team might know what that means. And they might say, hold on a minute. I have seen that error code. Contact me after the stand-up meeting and I will work with you. And then they will come back and take me to one side and say, look, 1403 stands for no records found. It's commonly returned in an Oracle database when you fire a query which does not fetch any record, or when you try to update something and it does not update a single record. So it is a warning, it's not a fatal error. If your query is written such that it doesn't return anything, it may not be a problem. So maybe if it's a technical issue or it's an issue that somebody else can solve, they should raise their hand and say, okay, I can work with you on that. But the discussion about the solution has to be offline. It cannot be in the stand-up. Why not? Because that's an issue then between you and the person you are trying to help. You don't want to waste the time for the whole team. Take those issues offline. But the wonderful thing about the daily scrum and the daily stand-up is that all these issues that team members are having become known to everybody else. Every single team member is in attendance. Everybody knows what everybody else is doing. Everybody knows what they did yesterday, what they are doing today, and everybody knows what they are stuck on. So as a self-organized, self-managed team, which is highly motivated, trying to do the best product development work possible, the expectation is that they will help each other out. They will do what it takes to unblock their teammates. If nobody else, then the Scrum Master, it is their role to unblock the team members when they are stuck and then help the team move forward. Okay? So that's the activity I wanted to perform in this demo session. I hope that was useful to you and it gives you an idea about what the Agile Scrum Master program is, what the curriculum looks like, and how Simplilearn in a unique e-learning module brings it all together to make it live, interactive, as well as informative for you and prepare you to achieve this certification.